Run away. Your daughter-in-law's family planned your murder. I still remember that cold morning. My husband's coffin stood before me, and everyone whispered their empty condolences. I thought the worst had already happened, until the priest leaned in and whispered those words in my ear. Hello, my dear friends. Thank you for joining me today. If you're listening to this story, I hope you'll take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And please, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you beautiful souls around the world. Your support means everything to this old woman's heart. Now, let me tell you about the darkest chapter of my life, and how I survived what should have been my end. The morning of Harold's funeral dawned gray and bitter, the kind of February cold that seeps into your bones and makes your joints ache. I remember standing in front of my closet, staring at the black dress I'd never imagined I'd have to wear. 43 years of marriage, and just like that, he was gone. A heart attack in his sleep, they said. Peaceful, they said. But there was nothing peaceful about waking up next to the cold body of the man you'd built a life with. I touched the fabric of that dress, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely button it. The face in the mirror looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed and pale, aged 10 years overnight. I'd done my hair the way Harold always liked it, pinned up with the pearl clip he'd given me on our 20th anniversary. Somehow, keeping that small routine made me feel like he was still there, telling me I looked beautiful even when I knew I didn't. The church was St. Michael's, the same one where we'd been married all those years ago. Walking through those heavy wooden doors, I could almost see us as we were then, young and full of dreams, not knowing what life would bring. Now those same doors welcomed me to say goodbye. The smell hit me first, that particular combination of old wood, candle wax, and funeral flowers. White lilies everywhere. I've hated the smell of lilies ever since. People were already gathering, filling the pews. I recognized faces from Harold's work, neighbors we'd known for decades, distant relatives who only appeared for weddings and funerals. Their voices created a low murmur, like bees in a hive, all blending together into meaningless sound. I felt their eyes on me, watching to see how the widow would hold up, if I'd cry, if I'd collapse. Everyone wants to witness grief, as if it's a performance put on for their benefit. My son David was waiting near the front pew. He looked so much like his father in that moment, tall and broad-shouldered in his dark suit, that my heart clenched. But when I reached for his hand, searching for comfort, his grip was brief and distracted. He pulled away quickly, turning to his wife. Lydia stood beside him, dressed in black that somehow looked fashionable rather than mournful. She'd always been beautiful in that calculated way, every hair in place, makeup perfect even for a funeral. When our eyes met, she gave me a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Or maybe I was imagining things. Grief does strange things to your mind. "How are you holding up, Margaret?" she asked, her voice dripping with a concern that felt rehearsed. "As well as can be expected," I managed to say, though my throat was tight. The service began with the tolling of the church bell, each deep note reverberating through my chest like a physical blow. Father Thomas, who'd known Harold and me for 30 years, spoke about love and loss, about a life well lived and a soul now at peace. His words were beautiful, I suppose, but they felt distant, like they were about someone else's husband, someone else's life. I sat in that front pew, staring at the coffin, trying to comprehend that Harold was inside it. The wood was polished oak, gleaming under the church lights. We'd picked it out together years ago, during one of those morbid but practical conversations long married couples have. "Nothing too fancy," he'd said. "Save the money for something useful." But David and Lydia had insisted on this expensive one, said it was what Dad deserved. At the time, I'd been too grief-stricken to argue. The service moved through its rituals, hymns and prayers and readings. I stood when I was supposed to stand, sat when I was supposed to sit, responding to everything automatically while my mind floated somewhere far away. I kept thinking about the last thing Harold said to me. We'd been watching television, some silly game show we both enjoyed. He'd looked over at me during a commercial and said, "Love you, Maggie girl." Just like that, simple and easy, the way he'd said it 1,000 times before. If I'd known those would be his last words, would I have said something different? Something more profound? When it came time for communion, people filed up to the altar in a slow, solemn line. I stayed seated, not trusting my legs to carry me. That's when Father Thomas came down from the altar, carrying the communion elements to me, a kindness for the grieving widow. He bent close, holding out the bread, and that's when I heard it. His voice was barely a whisper, his lips hardly moving. "Margaret, after the service, you need to run away. Your daughter-in-law's family has planned your murder." I froze. The piece of communion bread was in my hand, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I'd just heard. Father Thomas's face remained calm and priestly, giving nothing away to the watching congregation. He moved on to the next person, as if he'd said nothing more than a blessing. Had I imagined it? Was grief making me hear things? I looked down at the bread in my trembling fingers, then up at the coffin, then over at David and Lydia. She was watching me with those cold, assessing eyes. When she caught me looking, she smiled again. That same not quite right smile. The rest of the service passed in a blur. I heard nothing, saw nothing, my mind spinning in circles around those whispered words. Murder, planned, your daughter-in-law's family. It had to be my imagination. Some trick of grief and exhaustion and the stress of the day. Things like that didn't happen in real life. They certainly didn't happen to ordinary people like me. But Father Thomas wasn't the type to joke, especially not at a funeral, and the urgency in his voice, the way he'd said "run away," had been real. I knew that voice, had heard it counseled troubled souls for 3 decades. He'd never spoken to me that way before. The final blessing was given. People began to file out, heading to the parish hall where the funeral luncheon was being held. I stood on shaky legs, accepting hugs and murmured condolences from people whose faces blurred together. Everyone said the same things. "He was a good man. He's in a better place. Let me know if you need anything." Empty words that meant nothing and everything all at once. Lydia's mother appeared at my elbow, a tall, elegant woman named Victoria who'd always intimidated me. She came from old money, the kind of family that had had wealth for generations, and looked down on people like Harold and me who'd worked for everything we had. When David married Lydia 5 years ago, I'd hoped we could all be family, but Victoria had made it clear from the start that her daughter had married beneath her station. "Margaret, dear," she said, taking my arm with fingers that gripped a bit too tight, "you must be exhausted. Why don't you let me take you home? David and Lydia can handle the luncheon." "I should stay," I said, trying to pull away gently. People will understand that you need to rest. You look absolutely dreadful." She said it with a smile, but the words stung. "Come now, I insist." Before I could protest further, she was guiding me toward the door, away from the crowd. I looked back, searching for David, but he was surrounded by people from his father's company, shaking hands and accepting condolences. He didn't even glance my way. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. The church parking lot was full of cars, people standing in clusters, talking in low voices. A hearse waited to take Harold's body to the cemetery. I'd ride in it soon, follow him to his final resting place. But first, Victoria insisted on taking me to her car. "Really, I should stay with David," I tried again. "Nonsense. You need to preserve your strength." Victoria opened the door of her sleek black Mercedes. "Besides, we should talk about practical matters." Practical matters, something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Or maybe it was just Father Thomas's warning echoing in my head. I climbed into the car, my body moving on autopilot even as my mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to find the priest and demand to know what he meant. Victoria drove with the same cool efficiency she did everything else. We didn't go to my house. Instead, she pulled into a small cafe on the edge of town, one I'd never been to before. "I thought you were taking me home," I said. "In a moment, but first, coffee. You look like you need it." Inside, the cafe was nearly empty. Just a bored barista and an old man reading a newspaper in the corner. Victoria ordered 2 coffees and steered me to a table in the back, away from the window. Everything about this felt wrong, but I was too exhausted and shocked to fight. "Now then," she said, once we were seated with steaming cups in front of us, "we need to discuss your situation." "My situation, your financial situation, dear. Harold left you well provided for, I'm sure, but at your age, managing assets can be overwhelming. Lydia and David are concerned about you." I stared at her. My husband had been dead for 3 days, wasn't even in the ground yet, and she wanted to talk about money. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." Of course, but perhaps it would be easier if you signed power of attorney over to David. Just to take the burden off your shoulders. You shouldn't have to worry about bills and investments and all those tedious details while you're grieving. "I'll think about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's also the matter of the house, that big old place, all alone. You should consider selling, moving somewhere smaller, more manageable, perhaps a nice assisted living facility. Assisted living, I'm 68 years old and perfectly healthy. For now, dear, but at our age, things can change so quickly. It's better to plan ahead. Our age, Victoria was at least 10 years younger than me. Looked 20 years younger, with her expensive skincare, and probably some work done. She'd never thought of us as the same age before. I'm not selling my house, I said firmly. Harold and I built our life there. Her smile tightened. Well, we can discuss it later, after you've had time to rest and think clearly. Grief can cloud judgment, you know. She drove me home, finally, talking the entire way about options and arrangements and what's best for everyone. I barely heard her. Father Thomas's words kept playing over and over in my mind. Your daughter-in-law's family planned your murder. Victoria's family, the woman sitting next to me, talking about power of attorney and selling my house and putting me in a facility. Was she part of it? Was any of this real? My house felt empty and wrong when I walked through the door. Harold's jacket still hung by the entrance. His reading glasses sat on the side table where he'd left them. The silence was deafening. That night, I didn't sleep. Every shadow looked like death itself. Every creak of the old house settling made me jump. I kept thinking about Victoria's visit, her insistence on talking about my finances and my house. I thought about Lydia's cold smiles and David's distance. I thought about Father Thomas's desperate whisper, and I wondered if I was losing my mind, or if I was in more danger than I could possibly imagine. The funeral had been on Thursday. By Friday evening, I was beginning to convince myself that I'd misheard the priest, that grief had twisted innocent words into something sinister. Surely Father Thomas had said something normal, some standard blessing, and my traumatized brain had garbled it into a warning. I made myself tea and sat in Harold's chair, something I'd never done when he was alive. It still smelled like him, Old Spice and pipe tobacco, though he'd quit smoking years ago. I wrapped myself in the Afghan we'd bought on our trip to Ireland and tried to feel his presence. People always said they could feel their loved ones after death, watching over them. I felt nothing but absence. The doorbell rang, making me spill hot tea on my lap. I dabbed at the stain, irritated with myself for being so jumpy, and went to answer it. David stood on the porch, alone for once. Relief flooded through me. My son, my baby boy, now a 40-year-old man, but still my child. Maybe we could talk, really talk, the way we used to before Lydia. Maybe he could help me make sense of everything. Hi, Mom, he said, giving me a brief hug before stepping inside. How are you doing? As well as can be expected. Do you want some tea? No, I can't stay long. Lydia's waiting in the car. He glanced back toward the street where I could see her silhouette in the passenger seat. I just wanted to check on you, and, there's some paperwork. Dad's lawyer needs you to sign. Paperwork. All ready. Just formalities. The will, transferring some accounts, that kind of thing. He pulled a folder from under his arm, not quite meeting my eyes. Mr. Peterson said it's time sensitive. Mr. Peterson had been Harold's lawyer for 20 years. If he said something was urgent, it probably was. I took the folder and flipped through it. Legal documents, dense with text I couldn't focus on in my current state. Can't this wait a few days? I can barely think straight. I know, Mom, but there are tax implications. It really needs to be done this week. David shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Just sign where the tabs are and I'll get them back to Mr. Peterson. Something felt off. Harold had always been meticulous about planning, and he'd talked to me about his will just last year. He'd said everything was straightforward, that I'd inherit everything outright. Why would there be urgent paperwork now? I'd like to call Mr. Peterson myself before I sign anything, I said. David's expression hardened. Jesus, Mom, I'm trying to help you here. Do you not trust me? Of course I trust you, but these are important documents. Your father would want me to read them carefully. Fine, whatever. He snatched the folder back, his jaw tight. I don't know why you have to make everything so difficult. Lydia's mother was right. You're not thinking clearly. You've been talking to Victoria about me. She's concerned. We all are. You're acting paranoid. I'm being careful. There's a difference. Is there? He moved toward the door. You know what? Handle it yourself then. But don't call me when you're drowning in paperwork and tax forms you don't understand. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there, shocked. David had always been such a gentle boy, patient and kind. When had he changed? Or had Lydia changed him? I looked down at my hands, still shaking from the confrontation. My own son, treating me like I was senile or stupid. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe grief really was making me paranoid. But that night, as I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, I dreamed of Father Thomas at the funeral, whispering his warning over and over until it became a scream. Saturday morning, I woke to my alarm and reached for the pill bottles on my nightstand. I'd been taking medication for high blood pressure for years, the same prescription refilled monthly like clockwork. But when I opened the bottle, the pills looked different. The same basic shape and color, but slightly off somehow. The coating seemed duller. I squinted at the label. Everything looked right. My name, the medication name, the dosage, but something nagged at me. When had I picked up this refill? I couldn't remember. The days since Harold's death had blurred together. I decided not to take it. Maybe I was being paranoid, like David said, but better safe than sorry. I got dressed and decided to go to the pharmacy to check, to ask if there'd been any change in the medication's appearance. But first I needed to get some groceries. The house was nearly empty of food. I'd barely eaten since Harold died, surviving on tea and toast. But I needed to start taking care of myself. I got in my car, the same Honda Civic I'd been driving for 8 years, and started down the quiet suburban streets toward the store. It was a beautiful morning, sunny and clear, the kind of day that seemed to mock my grief. The world kept turning, indifferent to my loss. At the first stop sign, I pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. The car kept rolling forward. Panic flooded through me as I pumped the brakes desperately. The car was picking up speed, heading downhill, toward a busy intersection. My heart hammered against my ribs. I yanked the emergency brake. It caught slightly, making the car shudder, but not enough. I swerved right, scraping along a parked car with a horrible screeching sound, and managed to angle onto someone's lawn. The car bounced over the curb and finally came to a stop against a tree. The impact wasn't hard, but enough to knock the wind out of me. I sat there, shaking uncontrollably, the horn blaring because my head had hit the steering wheel. Doors opened. People came running. Someone was calling 911. I heard sirens in the distance. Ma'am, are you okay? I nodded, unable to speak. My hands wouldn't let go of the steering wheel. The police arrived. Then paramedics. They checked me over, worried about the bump on my forehead, insisting I go to the hospital. I refused. I was fine, I told them, just shaken up. A police officer, young and earnest, examined my car. Looks like brake failure, he said. When's the last time you had maintenance done? 3 months ago, I managed to say. Harold always kept up with maintenance. Well, sometimes things fail. You're lucky it wasn't worse. He helped me out of the car and called for a tow truck. Do you have someone who can pick you up? I thought about calling David, but after last night, I couldn't face it. Instead, I called my neighbor, Eleanor, who'd been my friend for 15 years. She arrived within minutes, her face creased with concern. Oh, Margaret, you could have been killed. Could have been killed. The words echoed in my head as she drove me home. It had been an accident. Just an accident. Things like brakes failed sometimes, even on well-maintained cars. But I couldn't stop thinking about the pills that looked slightly off, about Victoria insisting I sign over power of attorney, about David's anger when I wouldn't immediately sign papers I hadn't read. I couldn't stop thinking about Father Thomas's warning. By the time Eleanor dropped me off, I was exhausted and my head throbbed where it had hit the steering wheel. She wanted to stay, but I insisted I was fine. I just needed to rest. She made me promise to call if I needed anything, and finally, reluctantly, she left. I locked the door behind her and stood in my empty house, listening to the silence. Then I went to my purse and pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking as I scrolled through my contacts to the church office. St. Michael's. How may I help you? The secretary's cheerful voice seemed to come from another world. This is Margaret Chen. I need to speak with Father Thomas. It's urgent. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen, but Father Thomas is out on parish visit. Can I have him call you back? Please, as soon as possible. Tell him it's about what he told me at the funeral. There was a brief pause. Of course, I'll make sure he gets the message. I hung up and sat down, suddenly dizzy. When had I last eaten? I couldn't remember. I forced myself to make toast, to eat it even though it tasted like cardboard. I had to keep my strength up. The phone rang an hour later. I grabbed it on the first ring. Margaret, it's Father Thomas. Are you all right? Mary said you sounded distressed. Father, What you told me at Harold's funeral, about Lydia's family, did you really say that, or did I imagine it? A long pause. You didn't imagine it. Can we meet? Not at the church. Somewhere private? My heart sank. Part of me had hoped he'd laugh. Tell me I'd misunderstood, that there was nothing to worry about. Instead, his serious tone confirmed my worst fears. Where? I asked. Do you know Patterson Park, the pavilion by the pond? Yes. Can you meet me there in an hour? And Margaret, don't tell anyone you're meeting me, not even David. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there, staring at the phone, my mind reeling. This was real. Whatever this was, it was real. Father Thomas, a man I'd known and trusted for 30 years, was taking this seriously, was afraid enough to insist on secrecy. I looked around my house, seeing it with new eyes. Was I safe here? Were there cameras? I'd seen enough crime shows to know about hidden surveillance, but that was ridiculous. This was my home, mine and Harold's. We'd raised David here, celebrated holidays, lived our normal, ordinary life, except nothing was normal anymore. Harold was dead, and apparently, someone wanted me dead too. I grabbed my coat and purse and headed out, locking the door carefully behind me. Eleanor's car was in her driveway. I couldn't ask to borrow it without explaining where I was going. Instead, I walked to the corner and called an Uber, something David had taught me to do last year. The driver was a young woman who thankfully didn't want to chat. I sat in the back seat, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood pass by, wondering if I was losing my mind. Patterson Park was quiet on a Saturday afternoon. A few people walked dogs in the distance. A jogger passed by. I made my way to the pavilion, an old wooden structure overlooking a small pond where ducks paddled contentedly. Father Thomas was already there, dressed in civilian clothes rather than his clerical collar. He looked older than I remembered, tired and worried. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'm sorry for all the secrecy. I wasn't sure if your phone might be monitored." Monitored? Father, what's going on? What did you mean at the funeral? He gestured for me to sit on one of the pavilion benches, then sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly together. At the funeral luncheon, I overheard a conversation. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I was in the hallway outside the parish hall's storage room, looking for extra chairs. The door was cracked open, and I heard voices inside. Victoria, Lydia's mother, and another man I didn't recognize. They were speaking in low voices, but the acoustics in that hallway carried sound. He paused, looking out at the pond. A duck quacked, the sound jarring in the tense moment. "What did they say?" I whispered. The man asked if everything was in place. Victoria said it was, that you'd be taken care of within the month, that it needed to look natural. Then Lydia joined them and asked if David knew. Victoria said it was better if he didn't, that he'd accept it after the fact, especially once the assets were transferred. I felt the blood drain from my face. They're going to kill me. For money. I don't know for certain. I only heard fragments of conversation. But it sounded, Margaret, it sounded like they were planning something terrible. I couldn't just stay silent. "Did you call the police?" He looked ashamed. I thought about it, but what could I tell them? I overheard a vague conversation that might mean nothing. No specific threats, no concrete evidence. They'd say I was a paranoid old priest, and if I'm wrong, I'd be destroying lives with an accusation like that. "But you believed it enough to warn me." "Yes, because I know Victoria's reputation, the business dealings her family has been involved in. There have been rumors for years, whispers about how they've acquired their wealth. Nothing proven, but enough to make me deeply uneasy. And because I know you, Margaret, you and Harold were good people. You don't deserve whatever they're planning." I told him about the pills that looked different, about the brake failure that morning. His face grew grimmer with each word. "You need to be very careful," he said, "but you also need evidence. If you go to the police now, with just a failed brake line and some odd pills, they'll call it coincidence. You need proof of intent." "How am I supposed to get that?" "I don't know, but be vigilant. Document everything. And Margaret, if you truly believe you're in danger, maybe you should run, leave town, stay with relatives somewhere far away." I thought about it. I had a sister in Oregon I hadn't seen in years. I could go there, hide, wait for this to blow over. But blow over to what? They'd still have David. They'd still have access to everything Harold and I had built, and I'd be a frightened old woman living in exile, looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. "No," I said firmly, "I won't run. Harold and I built our life here. If someone wants to take it from me, they'll have to do it while I'm fighting. Father Thomas smiled sadly. You always were tougher than you looked. But please, be careful. Don't confront them directly. Don't let them know you suspect anything. We talked for a while longer, going over details, trying to make sense of fragments of conversation and suspicious events. Finally, he had to leave for evening mass. He made me promise to call him if anything else happened, anytime, day or night. I took another Uber home, my mind spinning with plans. Evidence. I needed evidence, but how? When I got home, there was a car in my driveway, Victoria's Mercedes. My heart hammered as I approached the house. Through the window, I could see her sitting in my living room, looking perfectly at ease in my space. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went inside. Victoria, what a surprise. She looked up with that polished smile. Margaret, DiL, I was worried when you didn't answer your phone. I wanted to check on you. I was out for a walk, getting some air. Excellent. Fresh air is so healing. I've taken the liberty of making some tea. Come, sit down. You look exhausted. She had made tea in my own kitchen, was serving it in my own cups. I sat down across from her, every nerve on alert. The cup she offered me steamed gently. I took it but didn't drink. I also wanted to continue our conversation from yesterday, she said, sipping her own tea. About practical arrangements. Lydia tells me you've been having some health concerns. Health concerns. I'm fine. Are you? Lydia mentioned you seemed confused at the funeral, and I heard about your car accident this morning. Very concerning at your age. How did she know about the accident? I'd only told Eleanor, unless she'd been watching me, or had somehow caused it. It was just brake failure. The police said these things happen, of course, but combined with other signs, it does make one wonder. Memory issues, confusion, now a car accident. Perhaps it's time to consider whether you should be living alone. I don't have memory issues, don't you? David mentioned you refused to sign important documents yesterday. He said you seemed paranoid, didn't trust him. That's not like you, Margaret. That's concerning. She was building a narrative. I could see it now, clear as day. The confused, grieving widow, losing her grip on reality, becoming a danger to herself. Who would question it if something happened to me? She was laying the groundwork perfectly. I wanted to read the documents before signing them. I said carefully, that's not paranoia, that's common sense. Of course, but perhaps you should have someone you trust review these matters with you, help you understand. David and Lydia only want what's best for you. I looked at her sitting in my living room, sipping tea from my cup, talking about what was best for me. This woman who'd looked down on me for 5 years, who'd made it clear at every family gathering that her daughter had married beneath her station. Now she was pretending to care. I appreciate your concern, I said, setting down my untouched tea, but I'm managing fine. Are you? She leaned forward. Because I have to be honest with you, Margaret, David is very worried. He's considering having you evaluated, for your own safety. Evaluated by a doctor to assess your mental competency. It's not an insult, dear. At our age, these things happen. But if you're deemed unable to make sound decisions, David could petition for guardianship. It would actually make things easier for everyone. There it was, the real threat, delivered with a smile and a concerned tone. They'd have me declared incompetent, take control of everything, and then what? How long would I survive after that? I see, I said quietly. I'm glad you understand. Now, I really think you should reconsider signing those documents, and perhaps it would be wise to give David power of attorney, just temporarily, until you're feeling more yourself. I need to think about it, of course, but don't think too long, dear. Time is important in these matters. She stood, smoothing her expensive skirt. I'll show myself out. Do take care of yourself. After she left, I poured both cups of tea down the sink and washed them thoroughly. Then I sat down and cried for the first time since Harold died. Not gentle tears, but great gasping sobs that shook my whole body. My son was going to have me declared incompetent. My daughter-in-law's family was plotting to take everything I had, and probably to kill me once I'd signed it all away. Harold would have known what to do. He'd always been the strong one, the problem solver. But Harold was gone, and I was alone. Except I wasn't entirely alone. I still had a few friends, and I still had my mind, despite what Victoria wanted everyone to believe. I wiped my tears and stood up. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. But I'd have to be smart about it, smarter than I'd ever been in my life. That evening, I called Eleanor and asked if she could drive me somewhere tomorrow. She agreed immediately, bless her. Then I went online and ordered a few items for rush delivery: a small digital voice recorder, a tiny camera disguised as a pen, and a safe deposit box key holder. If they wanted evidence that I was incompetent, I'd give them evidence of their own crimes instead. I took my pill bottles into the bathroom and, using a flashlight and my reading glasses, examined them closely. The tablets looked slightly different from my usual prescription. The coating was indeed duller, and when I looked very carefully, I could see small differences in the size. Using my phone, I took photos of the pills from every angle, then photos of the prescription labels. Then I put the pills in a Ziploc bag and hid them in the back of my closet. Tomorrow, I'd take them to be tested. As I lay in bed that night, I felt something I hadn't felt since Harold died. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Determination, maybe, the will to survive. They thought I was just a grieving old woman, easy to manipulate and eliminate. They'd forgotten that this grieving old woman had survived the depression as a child, had worked 2 jobs to put her husband through college, had built a business from nothing alongside Harold. They'd forgotten that I was tougher than I looked, and they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Sunday morning, I woke up early and got dressed carefully. Church clothes, the respectable widow. I even put on pearls. If Victoria or anyone else was watching, I needed to seem normal, not like someone who suspected murder plots. Eleanor picked me up at 9:30, giving me a hug when I got in the car. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" "Better," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. Having a plan, taking action, it made me feel less helpless. "Thank you for driving me today." "Of course. Where are we going?" "First, I need to stop by the pharmacy. Then I was hoping we could visit Harold's grave. I haven't been since the burial." "Absolutely. Take all the time you need." At the pharmacy, I asked to speak with the pharmacist privately. He was a young man named Chris who'd filled my prescriptions for years. I showed him the pills from my bottle and the photos I'd taken of my original prescription when I'd picked it up last month. "Do these look the same to you?" I asked. He examined them carefully, frowning. "Mrs. Chen, these definitely look different. The manufacturer sometimes changes coating or color slightly, but this seems more significant. When did you get this fill?" "That's just it. I don't remember getting it refilled, but the bottle has my name and the right prescription number." His frown deepened. "That's very odd. Let me check our system." He typed on his computer, then shook his head. "According to our records, your last refill was 3 weeks ago, and you picked it up yourself. But these pills don't match what we dispensed. Mrs. Chen, I think someone may have switched your medication." My blood ran cold, even though I'd suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed was different. "What are these pills, then?" "I'd need to send them to a lab to be certain, but based on appearance, they might be a sedative. Something like diazepam or a similar benzodiazepine." He looked at me seriously. "Have you been feeling drowsy, confused, having balance issues?" I thought about the dizziness I'd felt, the way my mind seemed foggy sometimes. I'd attributed it to grief. "Yes, actually, Mrs. Chen, this is very serious. Someone deliberately replacing your medication is a crime. You should contact the police." "I will, but first, can you test these pills? And can you give me a fresh prescription? One that I can be absolutely certain is correct." "Absolutely. And Mrs. Chen, be very careful who you trust." I thanked him and left with a new bottle of medication that Chris had personally verified and sealed in front of me. The old pills were going to the lab for testing. It would take a few days, but I'd have proof. Eleanor drove me to the cemetery next. Harold's grave was on a hillside overlooking the valley, a beautiful spot he would have loved. The grass hadn't grown over the fresh earth yet. The headstone wouldn't be placed for another few weeks. For now, there was just a simple marker with his name and dates. I knelt beside the grave, placing my hand on the cold ground. Eleanor stayed back, giving me privacy. "Harold," I whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know something. Our son is in trouble. He's fallen in with people who want to hurt me, maybe kill me, and I think he either knows and doesn't care, or they've manipulated him so thoroughly that he can't see the truth." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh earth and cut grass. "I'm going to fight them. I'm going to protect what we built, and I'm going to try to save David from his own mistakes. But I'm scared, Harold. I'm so scared. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this alone." I sat there for a long time, just being near him. Finally, I felt ready to stand. As I did, I noticed something odd. Fresh flowers sat on the grave next to Harold's, expensive roses, but the grave was old, the headstone weathered. The name read Sarah Mitchell, died 15 years ago, who was bringing fresh flowers to a 15-year-old grave. I looked around, but the cemetery was empty except for Eleanor waiting by the car. It probably meant nothing. Someone tending to a long-lost relative. But I took a photo of the grave anyway. Document everything, Father Thomas had said. Monday morning, my packages arrived. I set up the tiny camera pen on my bookshelf in the living room, angled to capture anyone sitting on the couch. The voice recorder went in my pocket, ready to activate at a moment's notice. I also called Mr. Peterson, Harold's lawyer, and made an appointment for the next day. I needed to know exactly what David had been trying to get me to sign. That afternoon, David called. "Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over?" "Of course, sweetheart. I'm your mother. You're always welcome here." He arrived an hour later, this time without Lydia. That was a good sign, I thought. Maybe we could actually talk without her influence. "Mom, look," he said, settling onto the couch, right where my camera could see him. "I'm sorry I was short with you the other day. This has been hard on me too. You know, losing Dad." "I know, honey. I'm sorry too. The thing is, we really do need to handle these legal matters. The estate, the house, everything. It's complicated, and the longer we wait, the more complicated it gets. I have an appointment with Mr. Peterson tomorrow. I'll sign whatever needs to be signed after I understand it fully." "That's fine, but there's something else." He looked uncomfortable. "Lydia's family has made us a very generous offer. They want to buy this house, well above market value. You could take that money and move somewhere nice, somewhere easier to maintain, maybe a condo, or even that retirement community on the lake you and Dad always talked about. Your father and I talked about retiring there someday, not about me living there alone." "I know, but things change. And honestly, Mom, staying in this big house by yourself, it's not safe. What if something happens? What if you fall, or have another car accident?" "How did you know about my car accident?" He blinked. "What? You told me." "No, David, I didn't." "Well, someone must have. Maybe Eleanor mentioned it." Eleanor didn't know David's number. We'd never been that kind of friendly. He was lying, and we both knew it. "The point is," he continued quickly, "you're not getting any younger. This house is too much for you. I'm 68, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my home." His jaw tightened, that same expression he'd had when I refused to sign the papers. "Why are you being so stubborn about this? Lydia's family is offering you a fortune. You could live comfortably for the rest of your life." "I am living comfortably, in the home your father and I built together." "Jesus Christ, Mom, Dad is dead. You're living in the past. It's not healthy. It's been less than a week, David. I'm allowed to grieve." "Grieve, sure, but don't make stupid financial decisions because you're emotional." "Stupid." He'd called me stupid. My son, the boy I'd raised, who I'd sacrificed for, who I'd loved unconditionally. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Fine, but you're making a mistake. When you're ready to be reasonable, call me." He stood up, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Mom, Lydia's been talking to some doctors about having you evaluated for dementia. She's really concerned about you." There it was again, the threat, delivered casually, like he was doing me a favor by warning me. "Thank you for your concern," I said, my voice flat. After he left, I played back the recording, got every word. I also checked the camera footage, his expressions, his body language, all captured perfectly. But I felt sick, watching my own son threaten me, manipulate me, lie to me. When had it gone so wrong? Had Lydia poisoned him against me slowly, over years? Or had he always had this capacity for cruelty, and I'd just never seen it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the David I'd raised, the little boy who'd cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail, the teenager who'd spent his weekends volunteering at the animal shelter, the young man who'd called me every Sunday without fail, just to chat. Where had that David gone? Tuesday morning, I met with Mr. Peterson in his office downtown. He was a dignified man in his 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He and Harold had been friends as well as business associates. "Margaret, I'm so sorry for your loss," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Harold was a good man, one of the best I knew." "Thank you, I appreciate that. Now, you said on the phone you had questions about Harold's estate." "Yes. David brought me some papers to sign. He said they were urgent, but I wanted to review them with you first." "Papers? What papers?" "I haven't sent anything to David. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. He said you needed me to sign them, something about time-sensitive tax issues. Mr. Peterson's expression darkened. Margaret, I've sent nothing of the sort. Harold's will is very straightforward. You inherit everything outright. There are no complicated tax issues, no urgent paperwork, not for months, at least. Then what was David trying to get me to sign? I'd need to see the documents. Did you keep them? No, he took them back when I refused to sign. Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Margaret, I'm going to be very frank with you. About 2 weeks ago, before Harold died, David came to see me. He wanted to know about power of attorney, about guardianship procedures, about what would happen if you were declared mentally incompetent. My heart hammered. 2 weeks ago, before Harold died. Yes. I found it odd at the time, especially since Harold was still alive. But David said he was worried about both of you. Planning ahead, he asked very specific questions about how to have someone declared incompetent. What kind of medical documentation would be needed? What did you tell him? I told him that involuntary guardianship is a serious legal process, not to be undertaken lightly, that it requires substantial medical evidence and court approval. I also told him that it was inappropriate to discuss these matters without his father present. Mr. Peterson paused. He didn't like that answer. In fact, he became quite agitated, said I was supposed to be the family lawyer, that I should be helping him, not making things difficult. Did you tell Harold about this conversation? I tried. I called him the next day, but he said David had always been a worrier, that I shouldn't read too much into it. He seemed tired. Margaret, more tired than I'd ever heard him. Mr. Peterson's eyes grew sad. That was the last time I spoke to him. I sat there, processing this information. David had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer, while his father was still alive, still healthy enough to be an obstacle. David was already plotting how to take control. Mr. Peterson, I need to ask you something. Harold's death, the heart attack, was there an autopsy? No. There was no reason for one. He'd had heart disease for years, was on medication. His doctor signed the death certificate without question. Could someone request an autopsy now, even though he's been buried? He looked at me sharply. Margaret, what are you asking? I took a deep breath. I'm asking if it's possible that Harold was murdered, that someone gave him something to trigger the heart attack. The silence in the office was deafening. Mr. Peterson stared at me, his face grave. Those are very serious accusations, he said finally. Do you have evidence? I have fragments, suspicious circumstances, but nothing concrete, not yet. Then I would be very, very careful about voicing such suspicions. If you're wrong, you could be sued for slander. If you're right, he trailed off, but his meaning was clear. If I was right, I was in grave danger. But hypothetically, could an autopsy be ordered? With a court order, yes, but you'd need to convince a judge there was probable cause. That's a high bar, and it would take time. He reached across the desk and took my hand. Margaret, tell me the truth. Are you in danger? I told him everything. The priest's warning, the switched pills, the brake failure, Victoria's threats, David's manipulation. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. This is Detective Sarah Martins. She's with the police department, handles financial crimes and elder abuse cases. She's sharp and she's honest. I think you should talk to her. Will she believe me? I don't know, but you can't handle this alone, Margaret. These people are dangerous. I took the card, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Going to the police meant crossing a line. Once I did that, there was no going back. David would know. Lydia and Victoria would know. The gloves would come off entirely. But maybe that was what needed to happen. Maybe hiding and gathering evidence wasn't enough. Maybe I needed allies with actual power. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long. And Margaret, change your locks, all of them, today, and consider staying somewhere else for a while, somewhere they won't expect. I'm not leaving my home. Then, at least, get a security system. Cameras, alarms, something. I nodded. He was right, of course, but cameras and alarms wouldn't stop someone truly determined to kill me. They'd just record my murder. As I left his office, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. The evidence I'd gathered, the recordings and photos and tested pills, the knowledge that my own son was involved in a plot against me, the fear that every moment might be my last. But I also felt something else. Anger, deep, burning anger. These people had taken my husband. They were trying to take my home, my money, my life. They were using my son, twisting him into someone I barely recognized, and I was done being afraid. That afternoon, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. I also had deadbolts installed on the bedroom doors. Then I called a security company and arranged for a full system to be installed the next day. While I waited for the locksmith, I went through Harold's office. He'd kept meticulous records of everything: our finances, our investments, the deed to the house, insurance policies. I made copies of everything and put them in a folder. Then I looked through his personal effects, his reading glasses, his favorite pen, his old college ring. In the back of his desk drawer, I found his journal. Harold had kept a journal for years, just random thoughts and observations. I'd never read it before. It felt like an invasion of privacy. But he was gone now, and I needed to understand what had happened in his final days. I opened to the last entry, dated 3 days before he died. David came by today, very agitated, wanted to talk about money again, about the business, said Lydia's family wants to invest, help us expand. I told him I wasn't interested in partners, especially Victoria's crowd. He got angry, said I was being stubborn and old-fashioned. We argued. Margaret smoothed things over, like she always does. But I'm worried about my son. Lydia's changed him. He used to care about people, about doing right. Now all he talks about is money and status. I need to talk to him. Really talk, maybe this weekend. But there hadn't been a weekend. Harold had died that night. I kept reading, going back through earlier entries, more arguments with David, concerns about Lydia's family, notations about missing files from his office, questions about his medication being empty faster than it should be. I'm probably being paranoid. He'd written 2 weeks before his death, but I could swear someone's been in my office. Papers moved around. My pill bottle was nearly empty, but I refilled it just last week. My hands shook as I read. Harold had suspected something was wrong. He'd noticed the signs, but he'd dismissed them, probably not wanting to believe his own son could betray him. I took photos of the journal pages, then put the journal in my purse. This was evidence, not proof of murder, but proof that Harold had concerns, had noticed anomalies. The locksmith finished his work and left me with new keys. I tested every lock 3 times, making sure they worked properly. Then I sat down and called Detective Martins. She answered on the 3rd ring. Martins, Detective Martins, my name is Margaret Chen. Mr. Peterson gave me your number. I need to report. I think someone is trying to kill me. Detective Sarah Martins agreed to meet me that evening at my house. She arrived at 7, a tall woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a nonsense manner. I liked her immediately. I showed her everything: the pills that were being tested, the recordings of David's conversations, the camera footage, Harold's journal, the priest's testimony about the overheard conversation. I told her about the brake failure, about Victoria's threats, about the papers David had tried to get me to sign. She took notes, asked pointed questions, and didn't once suggest I was being paranoid or hysterical. Mrs. Chen, she said when I finished, I'm not going to lie to you. Most of what you have is circumstantial. The journal entries and recordings show intent to manipulate you financially, possibly to have you declared incompetent, but they're not direct evidence of attempted murder. But the pills, the brakes, the pills will be important if they come back as something other than your prescribed medication. But you can't prove who switched them. The brake failure could genuinely be an accident. Older cars, things happen. My heart sank. So you can't help me. I didn't say that. She leaned forward. What you have is a pattern, and patterns can be very powerful. Here's what I can do. I can open an investigation into financial elder abuse. That gives me legal standing to look into your finances, to examine the documents David tried to get you to sign, to interview people. Will that stop them from trying to kill me? It might slow them down. Once they know the police are involved, they'll be more careful. Of course, that could also make you more of a threat in their eyes. She met my gaze seriously. Mrs. Chen, if everything you've told me is true, you're dealing with people who've already committed at least one murder. They won't hesitate to try again if they feel cornered. So, what should I do? The safest option: leave, go stay with relatives far away. Let me build a case. Come back when it's safe. I can't do that. This is my home. She nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. Then we set a trap. We get them to incriminate themselves in a way we can't ignore. But it will be dangerous, and you'll need to be willing to wear a wire, to put yourself in situations where they might reveal their plans. I'll do it. Whatever it takes. there's something else you should know. I ran a background check on Victoria's family. The Harringtons have been investigated 3 times in the past 20 years for financial crimes. Nothing ever stuck. They're very good at covering their tracks. But 2 people who were set to testify against them in separate cases died. One in a car accident, one from what was ruled a drug overdose, though neither person had a history of drug use. The room felt cold suddenly. They've done this before. We can't prove that, but yes, I believe they have, which is why you need to be extremely careful. Don't eat or drink anything you haven't prepared yourself. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. Vary your routine, and stay in public places as much as possible. She stood up, handing me a card with her direct number. Call me immediately if anything happens. Anything at all. I'm going to start my investigation tomorrow, which means they'll probably know about it by the end of the day. Be prepared for them to reach out, to try to gauge how much you know. After she left, I locked all the new locks and sat in the dark living room, thinking, tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest. Victoria and Lydia would know I'd gone to the police. They'd know I wasn't the helpless, grieving widow they thought I was, and they'd either back off or accelerate their plans. I thought about Harold, about the life we'd built together. 43 years of marriage, of partnership, of love. We'd weathered so much together, raised a son, built a business, grown old side by side, and now he was gone. And I was fighting for my life against people who should have been family, but I wasn't the same woman I'd been a week ago. That woman had been soft, trusting, willing to believe the best of people. Grief had burned that woman away, leaving someone harder, more suspicious, more willing to fight. I went upstairs to Harold's office and opened his gun safe. He'd kept a pistol there, registered and legal, for home protection. I'd never touched it before, had been vaguely afraid of guns my whole life. But Harold had insisted I learn to shoot. Had taken me to the range a few times years ago. The gun was still there. Cleaned and maintained the way Harold kept all his tools. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it. There were bullets in the drawer below. I didn't load it. Not yet. But I took it to my bedroom and put it in my nightstand drawer, just in case. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. But eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off into uneasy dreams of Harold warning me to run, to hide, to save myself. Wednesday morning, my phone started ringing at 8 a.m. David. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, at 8, again, at 9, finally, at 9:30. He sent a text. Mom, we need to talk. Now, call me back. I didn't respond. Let him sweat. Let him wonder how much I knew, how much I'd told the police. That at 10, someone knocked on my door. I checked the new peephole the locksmith had installed. Victoria looking imperious and annoyed. I didn't open the door. What do you want, Victoria? Margaret, don't be childish. Open the door. We need to discuss something important. Then discuss it through the door. A long pause. I understand you've been making some very serious accusations. Talking to lawyers, to the police, spreading vicious lies about my family. I haven't lied about anything, haven't you? I think grief has affected your judgment, Margaret. You're seeing conspiracies where there are none. It's sad, really, but we're willing to forgive it if you come to your senses now. Forgive it. How generous of you. Don't be sarcastic. This can still end well for everyone. All you need to do is sign over power of attorney to David, sell the house, and move somewhere appropriate for someone in your condition. We'll make sure you're well taken care of. And if I refuse? Another pause, longer this time. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. Then you'll force us to take legal action. We have doctors prepared to testify that you're mentally incompetent. We have documentation of erratic behavior. David is your next of kin. A judge will grant him guardianship, and then it won't matter what you want. You'll end up in a facility, and everything you and Harold built will go to its rightful owners anyway. Rightful owners? You mean you and your family? David is what's his is my daughter's. That's how marriage works. That's not how our marriage worked. Harold and I were partners. Harold's dead, and you will be too, if you keep fighting this. The words hung in the air between us, separated by a locked door. She'd said it, not explicitly threatening, but close enough. Was that a threat, Victoria? I could almost hear her smile. Of course not. I simply mean that stress at your age is very dangerous. Heart attacks, strokes, they can happen so suddenly, especially to someone who's been through recent trauma. The police are listening to this conversation. Victoria, I'm wearing a wire. It was a lie. but a good one. I heard her sharp intake of breath. You're bluffing. Am I? Do you want to risk it? Say something else threatening. See what happens. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps walking away. Through the window, I watched her get in her car and drive off. Her expression furious. My hands were shaking. I'd provoked her deliberately, shown my cards. Detective Martins probably would have told me not to, but I'd needed Victoria to know that I wasn't helpless, that I had allies, that killing me wouldn't be as easy as she thought. Of course, I'd also just made myself more of a threat, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. My phone rang. David again. This time, I answered. What the hell do you think you're doing? He shouted. No pretense of concern now, just rage. Going to the police, accusing us of trying to hurt you. Have you completely lost your mind? No, David. I think I've finally found it. You're destroying this family. This family was destroyed the moment you decided money was more important than your own mother. Don't you dare put this on me. I've done nothing but try to help you, and you've repaid me with paranoid accusations and lies. I haven't lied about anything. Unlike you, what's that supposed to mean? The papers you tried to get me to sign. Mr. Peterson says he never sent them. So what were they really, David? What were you trying to get me to sign? Silence on the other end. Yeah, that's what I thought, I said. You're not trying to help me. You're trying to steal from me. It's not stealing if it should have been mine anyway, he said. And there it was, the truth, finally naked and ugly. Dad left everything to you. Everything. After all the years I worked in his business, after everything I sacrificed, he left me nothing, just trusted that you'd do the right thing. So this is about the will, about money. It's about respect. It's about what I'm owed. His voice cracked with emotion. I gave up my dreams to work in Dad's business. I did everything he asked. And what did I get? A salary and empty promises about someday. Well, someday never came. And now you're sitting on a fortune that should be mine. David, your father left everything to me because that's what married couples do. We'd planned that when I died, everything would go to you. That hasn't changed, hasn't it? According to Mr. Peterson, you've been talking about changing your will, leaving everything to charity, he said, cutting me out completely. I haven't changed anything, but yes, I've considered it. Can you blame me? You're trying to have me declared incompetent. You're working with Victoria to steal my home and my money. You may have even helped murder your own father. What? No, I would never. Dad had a heart attack. His doctor said so. Did he? Or did someone give him something to trigger it? Something that would look natural? You're insane. You're actually insane. The police don't think so. Detective Martins is very interested in your activities, David, and Victoria's, and Lydia's. You're all under investigation now. You've ruined everything. Everything. Lydia's family was going to make us wealthy, set us up for life. All you had to do was die quietly like you were supposed to. The line went dead. He'd hung up, but not before confirming everything. The plan, the intent, even the desired outcome. He'd wanted me to die. My son had wanted me to die. I sat down heavily, feeling like I'd been punched. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that David was just being manipulated, that he didn't really understand what Victoria was planning. But no. He'd known. He'd been complicit. He'd wanted his inheritance badly enough to wish his own mother dead. The phone rang again. Detective Martins. Mrs. Chen, we have a problem. I just got word that Victoria Harrington has filed a complaint against you for harassment and slander. She's claiming you've been making false accusations, that you threatened her today at your home. That's ridiculous. She came to my house. She threatened me. I believe you, but she has a lot of influence in this city. The pressure's coming down from above to drop the investigation. Can they do that? They can make it very difficult for me to continue. Unless we get something concrete soon, something undeniable, I might be forced to back off. What do? We spring the trap tonight. Victoria's hosting a charity gala at her estate. Lots of wealthy donors, important people. She'll be distracted, feeling safe. I need you to go there. To the gala. I wasn't invited. You're going to crash it. Confront her publicly. See if you can get her to say something incriminating. I'll have plainclothes officers there, and I'll wire you properly this time. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, but it might be our only shot. If she thinks she's won, if she thinks she's gotten away with it, she might get cocky, say something she shouldn't. I thought about it, walking into the lion's den, confronting the woman who wanted me dead, in front of a crowd of her wealthy friends who probably all looked down on people like me. But Detective Martins was right. We needed something concrete, something undeniable. And I'd told Victoria earlier that I was wearing a wire. She'd be cautious now, careful about what she said, unless I could make her angry enough to slip up. All right, I said, I'll do it. Good. I'll have officers at your house in 2 hours to wire you up and brief you. Mrs. Chen, don't eat or drink anything at that party. And if things go wrong, if you feel unsafe at any moment, you say the word Harold, and my people will pull you out. Understood. Understood. After I hung up, I went to my closet and pulled out the one fancy dress I owned. A dark blue evening gown Harold had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I'd wear it tonight, walk into Victoria's world looking like I belonged there, and maybe, if I was lucky and brave enough, I'd get the justice Harold deserved. The officers arrived at 6. They fitted me with a wire, a tiny microphone hidden in a necklace, and a small recorder in my purse. They went over scenarios, what to say, how to provoke responses without making it obvious. The goal, Detective Martins explained, is to get Victoria or Lydia to admit to specific acts, the pill switching, the brake line tampering, discussions about killing you. If you can get them to threaten you directly, even better. What about David? If he's there, try to talk to him too, but be careful. He might be more resistant now that he knows we're investigating. At 7:30, a police car dropped me 3 blocks from Victoria's estate. I walked the rest of the way, my heart pounding with each step. The house was enormous, a mansion really, all lit up with fancy lights and expensive cars lining the long driveway. A valet took my coat at the door. I could see him sizing me up, probably wondering who I was and whether I belonged. But I held my head high and walked in like I owned the place. The main hall was full of people in expensive clothes, holding champagne glasses and making small talk. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. A string quartet played in the corner. It was the kind of ostentatious wealth Harold and I had always found distasteful. I spotted Lydia first, stunning in a red dress, laughing with a group of older men who looked like they'd bought their way into whatever charity this was supposedly benefiting. Then I saw David, looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo, standing slightly apart from the crowd. And finally, Victoria, holding court near the grand staircase, surrounded by admirers, looking like the queen of her domain. Our eyes met across the crowded room. Her expression went from shock to fury to cold calculation in the space of a heartbeat. Then she smiled, excused herself from her group, and walked toward me with purposeful strides. Margaret, what a surprise. I don't recall extending you an invitation. I thought we should talk. Clear the air. This is neither the time nor place. I disagree. I think it's the perfect time and place. All these important people, all your wealthy friends, they should know what kind of person you really are. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes were ice. You're making a scene. Not yet, but I could. People were starting to notice us, to turn and watch. Lydia had spotted me and was heading over, David trailing behind her. Mother, what's she doing here? Lydia hissed when she reached us. She's just leaving, Victoria said pleasantly. Aren't you, Margaret? Actually, I thought I'd stay for a bit. Enjoy the party. After all, I helped pay for this house, didn't I? Through David's inheritance. You delusional old woman, Lydia said, not bothering to hide her contempt. You haven't given us anything. Not yet, but that's the plan, isn't it? Get me to sign everything over, or have me declared incompetent so David can do it for me. Then, once you have it all, I have a little accident, just like Harold did. Mom, stop, David said, his face pale. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? Or am I embarrassing you? Tell me, David, did you know they were planning to kill me, or were you just hoping I'd die naturally soon? The crowd around us had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, this ugly family drama playing out in the middle of a fancy gala. You need help, Lydia said. Professional help. You're clearly suffering from delusions brought on by grief. Is that what you're going to claim? That I'm crazy? Funny, because I have evidence that says otherwise. Recordings of conversations, testimony from witnesses, pills that were switched for sedatives. The police are very interested in all of it. Victoria's mask slipped for just a second. You have nothing. Circumstantial nonsense that proves nothing. Maybe, but it's enough to start an investigation. Enough to make people ask questions, like why your family has been investigated for financial crimes multiple times, or why people who were set to testify against you ended up dead. Victoria's face went white. How dare you come into my home and make such accusations, easily? Because they're true, and because I'm not afraid of you anymore. You should be, she said quietly, and there was real menace in her voice now. Mother, Lydia grabbed her arm. Don't. But Victoria shook her off. No, I'm tired of this woman and her delusions. You want to know the truth, Margaret? Fine. Yes, we wanted you out of the way. Yes, we made plans. But you were supposed to be easy, a grieving widow, confused and helpless. Instead, you've been nothing but a problem. Are you admitting you tried to kill me? I'm admitting we discussed options for dealing with an obstacle. That's what you are, you know, an obstacle to what's rightfully ours. Mother, shut up. Lydia was pulling at her arm now. Panic. She's wearing a wire. Victoria's eyes widened, then narrowed. Of course she is. You think you're clever, don't you, Margaret? Clever enough to survive your plans. This proves nothing. Vague statements at a party could mean anything. You have nothing concrete, and you never will. What about Harold? I pressed. Did you have nothing to do with his death too? Victoria laughed, cold and bitter. Harold, that pompous fool who thought he was better than us because he worked for his money. He was surprisingly easy, a little digitalis in his evening medication, just enough to stress his already weak heart. Very poetic, really. Killed by his own medicine. The room erupted. Gasps, shocked murmurs, someone screaming. David staggered backward like he'd been shot. You killed my father. His voice was barely a whisper. Victoria seemed to realize what she'd said. No, I didn't mean that was hypothetical. I was just... But it was too late. Detective Martins and 3 other officers appeared from the crowd, badges out. Victoria Harrington, you're under arrest for the murder of Harold Chen and the attempted murder of Margaret Chen. The next few minutes were chaos. Victoria shouting that it was entrapment, that her lawyers would destroy us all. Lydia crying, claiming she knew nothing about any of it. Guests backing away, pulling out phones to record everything. And David, standing frozen in the middle of it all, staring at Victoria like he was seeing a monster for the first time. I walked over to him slowly. He looked at me with eyes full of horror and shame. Mom, I didn't know about Dad. I swear I didn't know. I thought he just died. I never would have. But you knew about the plans for me. You knew they wanted me out of the way. I thought they just meant ... legally. Power of attorney. Moving you somewhere. I didn't think they meant kill you. I swear I didn't think that. But you were willing to steal from me, to have me declared incompetent, to take everything your father and I built. I was angry, he said, tears streaming down his face now. Angry that Dad left me nothing. Angry that I'd wasted my life on his dreams instead of my own. And Lydia, she kept saying you didn't deserve it, that we deserved it. Her family said they could make us rich, really rich, if we just played along. I didn't ask too many questions because I didn't want to know the answers. That's not an excuse. David, I know. God, Mom, I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Not yet. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Maybe I never would be. The police will want to talk to you, I said quietly. I suggest you tell them everything you know. It's the only way you might avoid prison. I deserve prison. I deserve worse. I left him there, crying in the middle of his mother-in-law's grand hall, and walked out into the night. Detective Martins caught up with me at the door. You did good in there, Mrs. Chen. Really good. That confession, combined with everything else, it's enough. We'll get her for both murders. Will you get Lydia too? Depends on what she knew and when. We'll investigate thoroughly. I promise you that. And David, Martins sighed. That's complicated. He was clearly involved in the financial manipulation, the attempted guardianship. But if he didn't know about the murder attempts, if he really believed they were just going to pressure you legally, then his charges might be lesser. Fraud, elder abuse, but not attempted murder. He's still my son, I said softly. Even after everything. I know, that's the hardest part, isn't it? The trial took months to organize. Victoria was denied bail, deemed a flight risk. Her lawyers tried everything, claiming entrapment, arguing that her confession was coerced or misunderstood. But the recording was clear. Too clear. The lab results on my pills came back. They'd been replaced with diazepam, a strong sedative, combined with my blood pressure medication. They could have caused dizziness, falls, impaired judgment, all building the case that I was mentally declining. The police also exhumed Harold's body. The autopsy found traces of digitalis in his tissues, far more than his prescribed medication could account for. Victoria had told the truth about that. At least, she'd poisoned him, slowly, over several days. Until his heart couldn't take it anymore, David cooperated fully with the investigation. He testified against Victoria and Lydia, told them everything about the plans, the pressure, the promises of wealth. In exchange, he pled guilty to fraud and conspiracy and received a 5-year sentence with possibility of parole in 3. Lydia claimed ignorance, said her mother had acted without her knowledge, but prosecutors found text messages between them, discussing the situation and dealing with Margaret. She was convicted of conspiracy and received 7 years. As for Victoria, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree for Harold, attempted murder and elder abuse for me. The judge gave her life without parole. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row, making sure she saw me, making sure she knew that the obstacle she'd tried to eliminate was the one who'd destroyed her. After it was all over, after the verdicts and the sentencing, I finally allowed myself to grieve, really, truly grieve, not just for Harold, but for the son I'd raised who'd betrayed me, for the family I'd thought we were, for the life I'd imagined having in my old age. I cried for weeks. Father Thomas came by often, sat with me, prayed with me when I wanted prayer, and just listened when I didn't. Eleanor brought me meals and made sure I ate. Detective Martins checked in regularly, making sure I was safe and coping. Slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. I sold the house. Too many memories, both good and bad. I couldn't walk through those rooms anymore without seeing Harold at the breakfast table, or David as a little boy playing in the yard, or Victoria's cold eyes as she threatened me. I bought a smaller place, a condo near the lake that Harold and I had always talked about. It has a beautiful view and feels like a fresh start. I changed my will, as Victoria had feared I would. Most of my estate goes to charity now, organizations that help the elderly, that fight financial abuse, that support victims of domestic violence and manipulation. A scholarship fund in Harold's name for first-generation college students who want to study business. I left some money in trust for David's children, if he ever has any. Not for David himself, but for innocent grandchildren who shouldn't suffer for their father's crimes. The trust specifies that David can never touch it, can never control it. As for David himself, I visited him in prison once, just once. He looked terrible, thin and pale, his eyes haunted. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. Mom, I know I can't undo what I did. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know that I think about it every day, about Dad, about what they did to him, about what I almost helped them do to you. It destroys me." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "You should think about it every day for the rest of your life. I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "No, you don't." We sat in silence for a while, separated by bulletproof glass, connected by a phone line and decades of complicated history. "But maybe someday," I said finally, "when you've served your time and proven you've changed, when you've made amends, not just to me but to the memory of your father, maybe someday we can try to rebuild something. Not what we had, that's gone forever, but something new, something honest." He started crying then, silent tears running down his face. "I'll spend my whole life trying to be worthy of that chance. See that you do." I haven't visited again. Maybe someday I will, or maybe I won't. I'm still figuring out what forgiveness looks like, what I owe him as his mother versus what I owe myself as the woman he betrayed. Father Thomas says forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, that I can forgive David for my own peace of mind without restoring him to his former place in my life. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. I visit Harold's grave every week. I tell him about my new condo, about the scholarship fund, about the small victories and struggles of my new life. I like to think he can hear me, that he knows justice was served, that the woman he loved turned out to be stronger than anyone expected. "You always said I was tougher than I looked," I tell his headstone. "I guess you were right. The priest's warning had saved my life. Those whispered words at the funeral, urging me to run, had set everything in motion." Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he hadn't overheard that conversation, if he'd stayed silent. I'd probably be dead, my estate transferred to David and Lydia, Victoria enjoying her ill-gotten gains, but that's not what happened. Instead, I stood my ground. I fought back, and I won. I'm 70 now. 2 years since Harold died, since my life turned into a nightmare and then into a battle. I'm not the same woman I was. Grief and betrayal changed me, hardened me in some ways, but also made me appreciate what really matters. I have good friends. People like Eleanor and Father Thomas who stood by me when everything fell apart. I have my memories of Harold, the good years before the end, the love we shared for over 4 decades. I have my independence, my health, my safety, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that the people who tried to destroy me are behind bars, that they'll never hurt anyone else the way they hurt me. And Harold. Is it the life I imagined having in my old age? No, but it's mine, earned through survival and courage I didn't know I possessed. Sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that moment at the funeral, the priest leaning in, whispering his warning, the choice I faced, run away or stand and fight. I chose to fight, and though it cost me dearly, though I lost my son and my old life and my sense of safety, I don't regret it, because they wanted my life. They wanted to erase me, to take everything Harold and I built together and claim it as their own. They wanted me to go quietly, a helpless victim who never saw it coming. Instead, I gave them their own destruction. I exposed their crimes, brought them to justice, made sure the world knew what they'd done, and now I get to live. Really live, not just survive. I take art classes at the community center. I volunteer at a women's shelter, helping other victims of family abuse find the courage to fight back. I travel to places Harold and I always meant to visit, but never did.